Good morning. I'm Maxine Riley, a current MBA student at HEC Paris.
And I'm Michael Stapleton, also an MBA student here at HEC Paris.
We're here this morning with Professors Olivier Sibony and Bernard Garrett to discuss their new book, Cracked It: How to Solve Big Problems and Sell Solutions Like Top Strategy Consultants. Bernard Garrett is the former dean of our MBA program, and Olivier Sibony joins us after over 25 years as a senior partner at McKinsey. They wrote Cracked It together with Corey Phelps, who's a strategy professor and the dean of executive education at McGill University.
So to start this discussion, when Maxine and I started the MBA program here, we were a little bit surprised to see a course on problem solving and communications as part of our curriculum. Can you talk about why this skill matters for MBAs, why it needs to be part of a curriculum?
Well, the obvious place to start is to ask the recruiters, the people who hire the MBAs, and they tell us loud and clear that these skills do matter. When you ask recruiters, the Financial Times did, for instance, it polled MBA recruiters and asked them what are the most important skills that you're looking for, and consistently when they do that, the ability to solve complex problems ranks among the top 5. Bloomberg Businessweek did another survey, same kind of answer. The thing is, they also tell the pollsters that these skills are among the hardest to find. They are not only important, they're also very difficult to find in newly minted MBAs. So basically what they were telling us was, you guys, business schools in general, you're not doing your job, you're not delivering what we need. That was a real gap.
So is this mainly a career thing, or is there also an academic component to these skill sets?
Well, actually both. So it's definitely a career thing, but also in terms of the curriculum of the MBA, we thought that was a really important addition. And one of the reasons was that the students told us that the courses sometimes can be perceived as disconnected. So they get courses in marketing, finance, strategy, etc., etc. But MBA students who are experienced people, and then they go back to companies, realize that when problems arise in real life, they don't come with a nice label saying it's a finance problem or strategy problem. And basically what they need is an integrative way to solve problems. And so in terms of the curriculum, in terms of the connection between the courses and the sort of integrating all the knowledge together, we thought that a course like problem solving and communication was really useful.
Mm-hmm. Could you give us an example of that type of problem, integrated across disciplines?
Well, here's one. The difference between the integrated problems and the sort of problems that every business person, in fact everyone, solves every day, is the integrative nature. So typical problem that we solve every day would be, for instance, you're a marketing person and you need to design a new campaign and you need to choose between different options. Yeah. Or you're a production manager and you've got a problem in the plant and you need to solve the problem and to get the line back to normal production. Those are very important problems. And when we talk about problem solving, people often think, but that's what I do all day, because that's the sort of problems they solve. Now, here's an integrative type of problem that's completely different from this. Suppose, since we're on Facebook, suppose you're Mark Zuckerberg and the Cambridge Analytica scandal is hitting. What kind of problem is that? As Bernard was saying, it doesn't come with a label that says, hey, it's a PR problem, or hey, it's a strategy problem, or hey, it's a marketing problem, or hey, it's a technical problem. It's all those things at the same time. How are you going to frame that problem in order to be able to solve it? That's what we mean.
Okay.
Well, not all the problems that we are talking about are as dramatic as this one. But yes, I mean, the important distinction is between routine problems and non-routine problems. And so the example that Olivier mentioned is a non-routine problem.
Right.
Yeah.
And so the book is dedicated to these type of problems. But it can be, for example, an entrepreneur trying to design a new offering for a new target of clients. It can be a young consultant starting her job and having a chunk of the study to do. It can be a lot of different things. Mm-hmm. Just problems that are non-routine, complex, and that call for specific problem-solving approach.
But Professor Sibony just mentioned that we run into these problems all the time at our jobs. So can't we just learn this in our day-to-day routines at work? Why do we need to look at this in an academic lens?
Well, I think the danger, if you are not trained in problem solving, is to mistake non-routine problems for routine problems. And in this case, the pitfall is that you will solve any problem like a routine problem.
Uh-huh.
And so what do we do when we solve routine problems? Well, in general, we jump to conclusions. So basically, we know what the problem is about, we have a solution in mind, we do a quick mental check to verify that it might work, and then we switch into implementation mode immediately. And so we don't take the time to really pose the problem, to analyze it, etc., etc.
Mm-hmm.
We just jump to conclusions and implement that. And this can be very deceptive, very risky. So yes, I think the training is important.
Here's an example, actually, which is one of the many stories we tell in Cracked. Suppose you're the music industry at the turn of the century, and you're suddenly realizing that students in their dorms are going to Napster and to other peer-to-peer sites and downloading music for free. What is this? Now, if you are looking at this as a routine problem, as one of the many problems you've solved before, you recognize this, or you think you recognize this, as a problem of piracy.
Mm-hmm.
You've been dealing with piracy at the time of the cassette tapes. You've been dealing with piracy when people are printing bootleg CDs and selling them on the night markets in Asia. So you recognize this problem. You've been there before. What's the solution? The solution is sue the bastards. And that's what you do,
Yep.
right? And so you join forces with all your peers in the industry and you sue Napster and you get them shut down and you declare victory. Have you been successful? Of course not. You've solved the wrong problem. The people who've been solving the right problem, who framed the right problem, who stated the right problems, as we call it, which is the first step in the problem-solving method, are the folks at Apple who said, hold on for a second, the real problem here is how do we make money in the age of digital music? Now, if you can solve that problem, you can create the iPod and the iTunes Store.
Mm-hmm.
So let's flip that around. What would happen if we graduate our MBA and we don't learn how to solve problems?
Well, I think the exactly what we said. The risk is to not to take the time, basically, to really try to understand what the problem is and just jump to conclusions. And this is how people solve problems in companies and organizations in general. Only too frequently.
Mm-hmm.
So the advantage of having a systematic method and an organized method is at least twofold. The first thing is that our method is systematic, and so we call it the 4S method because the 4S stands for state, structure, solve, and sell. So basically solve comes only third, which means that the message is to take the time to really state and structure the problem before trying to solving it. Mm. So I think this is an advantage, and this can have major consequences in the way in which you really approach the problems. And so of course the advantage is just to have a better solution, because you will have looked at the problem from different facets, and you will have explored all the analysis and all the steps you need to really go through in order to find this solution. So the advantage is just to be systematic. Okay. The second thing is the ability to work in teams, because most people solve problems in teams. And in current organizations, these teams are generally multinational, and sometimes they work from people work from different places. And so miscommunication or the inability to really tackle the problem in an organized manner is really important. So having a common method, a shared approach to solve the problem can be really impactful, because if people share the same approach, they will communicate much easier, the communication will be much easier, and the ability to find a solution and to leverage the knowledge and the skills of the whole team will be much better.
So problem solving is something that's not usually taught as a standalone course, sort of embedded in courses here and there. Where did the frameworks that you talk about in Cracked It come from? Did you just make them up?
We didn't just make them up, although we did make up the 4S method as a sort of integrative approach to problem solving. It comes from 3 different places which we blended together. The first is the first place we looked is what the strategy consultants do, because they solve complex business problems for a living. Typically, when you have a very complex, integrative, ill-defined problem of the sort we talked about earlier, what do? You call strategy consultants, and somehow they solve it. It's not because they're smarter than you are. It's not because they know your business better. They clearly don't. So how is it? Well, it's because they have a method, and their method is rooted in good old logic that goes back to Descartes and to Aristotle and so on. But it's packaged in very neat, useful tools like the issue tree and the hypothesis pyramid, and we talk about all those things in some great detail. And they're very useful. They're usually not taught outside of the world of consulting. They will be very useful to people preparing for case interviews in consulting firms. So that's one source. However, we didn't want this to just be a book about consulting. It's not a consulting textbook. It's a book for executives and managers who have business problems to solve. So we looked for 2 other places. One is cognitive psychology, because it has a lot to tell us about the pitfalls that people run into when they try to solve problems. And the other, interestingly, is design thinking, because it struck us that many problems that people actually face are not amenable to the sort of decomposition that consultants are very good at doing, but actually require more holistic thinking. So these 3 sources, the consulting toolbox, cognitive psychology, and design thinking, are the 3 inspirations, and our work has been to blend them together in an integrative framework that actually tells you which method to use for what problem.
Mm-hmm.
So I can see how this type of approach would be really useful for CEOs or ultimate decision makers, but what about for us just having graduated our MBA? Are we going to be able to apply these tools to advance our careers?
Oh, I certainly hope so. and I think, in particular at the beginning of a career, it can be extremely useful because as Olivier said at the beginning, recruiters look for this type of skills in candidates. And the reason why is because in current organizations, organizations are not as, let's say, hierarchical as they used to be. And so most of them are project-based. So you will be put in teams and basically to solve problems. Or your boss will give you some kind of work to do, or you will join, a management development program in a company in which you will be assigned to different positions. And in each position during, 1 year and a half, you will have different problems to solve. So yes, I think even at the beginning of a career, the likelihood that you are exposed to non-routine problems to solve is actually very high, and it gets higher and higher. So I think, students must be equipped with this type of skills.
And so a lot of these skills are consulting skills, which obviously have value, but how do business leaders, entrepreneurs, visionary leaders approach their problems? Why should we trust consultants' approaches over theirs?
Well, actually,
maybe we shouldn't.
Yeah, exactly. I think, as Olivier said, the consulting part is only one part.
Sure.
And it's based on decomposing a problem into smaller issues that you can solve one by one. So it's extremely analytical. So it basically tells you which analysis you have to perform in order to solve tiny bits of a bigger problem and then make that cohere into a solution for a larger problem. So this is the consulting part, and it's useful. Mm-hmm. But I agree with you. It doesn't help to solve any type of problem. And so this is why basically we looked into other things. And so speaking of visionary leaders or entrepreneurs, etc., yeah, I agree. Not all problems and this type of problems do not fit with the typical analytical method. Mm-hmm. So some problems are amenable to this analytical method, others are not. And so this is why design thinking is so important.
So it's not just the visionary leaders, by the way. Even a regular executive will sometimes have to decide on an advertising campaign or on designing a new product, or in fact, on shaping a new strategy. And that's the sort of thing where you need a holistic approach as opposed to a decomposition approach.
Mm-hmm. Looking beyond a broader set of just than normal consulting tools.
Exactly.
So let's get a little even more forward thinking here. We live in a world where two big terms are used quite a bit: artificial intelligence and big data. You mentioned earlier, Professor Sibony, that recruiters, when polled, said that solving complex problems was one of the biggest skills they looked for and weren't quite getting from MBAs. Isn't the real skill then the ability to write the code for the AI tool that will solve the problem for you?
That would be neat, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
We can just sit back and relax and enjoy life and let the machine solve all the problems for us. Unfortunately, or fortunately actually, we don't think that's going to happen. And the reality is that big data and artificial intelligence will be a tremendous help in the solving part of problem solving, which, as Bernard mentioned earlier, is only the third step, right? It's a very powerful analytical help. But to state what the problem is, to define what problem you're trying to solve, to structure this problem and decide on what approach you're going to take to solve it, and eventually to sell the solution to human beings, you're going to require human beings. In fact, business judgment of the kind that solves problem is not a substitute for artificial intelligence, or artificial intelligence is not a substitute for it, it's a complement. And as the cost of artificial intelligence goes down, the authors of a book called Prediction Machines explain this very neatly. As the cost of artificial intelligence goes down, the demand for its complement, business judgment, will rise. So the value of being able to have good problem-solving instincts and good problem-solving method is going to be greater, not less, in the age of artificial intelligence.
Actually, there is a study or a forecast by the World Economic Forum that says that the top three skills to thrive in the fourth industrial revolution are complex problem solving, critical thinking, and creativity. So these needs will become greater, not smaller, because of these new technologies.
Absolutely.
And this is basically our table of contents.
So a lot of people think that they are intuitively good at problem solving. How do you communicate to people when you work in a team to solve problems that they need to be using these frameworks and get on board with the same structure?
Well, there is a very simple trick that you can use and that we use in our course, which is just to put people in a situation. So basically give them a case and tell them, okay, now you have 1 hour as a team to state the problem, just to write the problem statement, to tell us what the problem is. And so, of course, they think they will spend like 10 minutes doing it, and they are surprised to realize that actually they need 1 hour, and sometimes they don't even finish in 1 hour. And probably the fact that we have international students is also a factor, because they have to just to communicate properly in order to do that. And so some students tell us, well, I didn't believe that it would take 1 hour to agree on a simple sentence in plain English to state a problem. And so it shows the importance of just, stepping back and trying to really understand what the situation is, what the issue is, and you need a method to do that, because otherwise...
Because then they realize that if they hadn't done that, they would have proceeded to solve completely different problems.
Exactly.
And they would have talked past each other for the entire time of the problem-solving exercise.
So beyond just stating the problem and getting on the same page, what are the most difficult aspects of problem solving and solution selling?
Well, I don't think it's necessarily difficult if you take the method in its entirety, and if you do it right, basically, it's not that difficult. It takes a bit of effort to actually see the whole forest and not to grab one branch of one tree. I'll give you an example. Very often people hear about this tool of the consulting toolbox called hypothesis-driven problem solving. It sounds really cool because what it basically says is, hey, instead of looking at all the possible options, let's pick one that is our hypothesis. And of course, we don't say it's the right solution, but we're going to test it. And if the test is conclusive, it will be the solution. If it's not, we'll look for something else. It's a very efficient way of solving problems, and consultants do it all the time. Now, what happens when you try to do this in a corporate setting? The hypothesis is most likely going to be supplied by your boss. And then how thoroughly are you going to challenge that hypothesis? Well, maybe not quite as thoroughly as an external consultant who is not subject to the same pressures would. So some of the safeguards that exist in a consulting setting cannot be reproduced in a corporate setting, and therefore some of the methods that you would naturally apply if you don't see the whole picture can actually turn out to be dangerous. So what is difficult is picking the right part of the toolkit, the right tool from the toolbox, and for that you need the entire method.
Okay. So, one final question. You talked about how using the wrong framework for the wrong problem can get you to the wrong solution. Are there any other limitations to the frameworks, or if you use them properly, will they work every time?
Yeah, well, picking the right framework is definitely a challenge. And
selling the solution.
And selling the solution is probably even a greater challenge. And then the problem is that in a lot of cases, what people tend to do is to enter into selling mode too early. So when I said earlier that solve was only the third step, sell is the fourth step, is the final step. And if you believe that you are going to make time by, for example, writing PowerPoint slides from day one in a consulting study, in general you're wrong, because actually you will not even show most of these pages to the clients. But it's a very, very sort of tempting behavior, because you actually believe you are going to make time by starting to design the solution almost immediately, which is the selling part. So one of the messages that we have in the book is to tell people, well, don't click on PowerPoint too early. Just start. When you are in the selling mode, so you are convinced you have found a correct solution, try first to write your storyline. So basically, the story you are going to tell the problem owner, and tell the story of the solution, not the story of the search. So basically, you have to find convincing arguments to actually sell the solution. And on top of that, start with the core message, the governing thought, the most important thing. Mm-hmm. And this must be a call for action. Because what problem owners want is something that they can act upon in order to really implement the solution. So the selling part must be something actionable. Not just a recommendation that stays like a sort of intellectual analysis of the problem. And then finally, probably we must also understand that selling is as important as solving. Mm-hmm. So solving comes first, but then selling is really important. And not selling a correct solution is obviously a problem, because it will not be implemented if you don't sell it. And there are many reports, many very good work that is just lost because it was not sold to the problem owners. But also selling a wrong solution, so selling too early or selling a wrong solution, is also very dangerous. Mm-hmm. So there is a very well-known example, which is the nutrition example, or that in the world there is an epidemic of obesity, And for years, the solution that was sold to people was to eat less fatty food.
Right, low-fat diets, sure.
So basically, the low-fat diet was the most common solution that was just sold to people. And I mean, since the 1970s, scientists know it's wrong, that the main source of obesity and coronary diseases, etc., is sugar, not fat. But the problem is that the fat story was sold very efficiently, while the sugar story was not sold very well, even though it was better in scientific terms. And actually, there was a book written by a British scientist in the 70s. It was called White, Pure and Deadly, The Problem of Sugar, something like that.
Yep.
And this book actually was very well received, but the author didn't really, convince the public authorities, etc., that his views was right. And he had a competitor, a US scientist, who probably truly believed that he was right in his fat story or low-fat diet story, and who sold it extremely well, even conducting international empirical studies to make the point, etc. And he sold it to the U.S. Congress, to the presidents, to everyone, and for decades, people believed in this story. So, selling the wrong solution can be even more harmful than not selling the correct solution. So the connection between these two things, the ability to really state, structure, and solve a problem, and the ability to sell the solution, this connection is really important. And I think it is probably what makes our approach different. Which is that in a lot of situations, these two things are disconnected. So you can find a lot of things on how to convince people, how to tell stories, etc. But the problem is that if storytelling is the only important skill that you learn, the risk is, to tell a nice story, but actually a wrong story.
Right, selling the wrong solution.
So reading your book and learning the frameworks, that's just step one. Implementing them is the next part.
Definitely more important.
Great. The Kindle version of Cracked It is now available on Amazon and ranked currently as #1 in the business management category. Professors, thank you very much for your time. Enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.